27-point lead. And my wife's like, "Oh my God, this game's awful." And I was like, "Babe, just wait." Unbelievable choke job by the Chargers. There is not a Chargers fan in existence that was comfortable with that 20-point lead.
Talk about the fact that they fired Joe Lombardi. The second point that I think is objectively true about Brandon Staley is right now he's a terrible in-game manager. He makes terrible in-game decisions.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
May be the greatest catch I've ever seen.
One of those teams that was certainly in that divisional was the Los Angeles Chargers, and they did not do that well, my friend.
No.
Oh, they jumped out to a 24-0 lead, and my wife was like,
27. 27.
I'm sorry, 27-point lead. And my wife's like, "Oh my God, this game's awful." And I was like, "Babe, just wait.
Hang on.
Hold up. I've been following Chargers a long time, boy. Let me tell you, they're going to let them back in this game somehow, some way. I'm not saying they're going to lose, but they're going to let the Jaguars back in this game somehow, some way. And sure as hell they did, man. Oh my God. Unbelievable choke job by the Chargers. I even tweeted it out that there is not a Chargers fan in existence that was comfortable with that 20-point lead going into halftime. And lo and behold, quite prescient was that tweet as the Chargers give up the, the third largest NFL playoff comeback in history. Brutal. Up 27 points, up 20 points at halftime, and end up losing that ball game, Matt Harmon.
Oh my God, man. The words of Austin Eckler on the podcast with me all year, the other show I do, we're in the back of my mind, when he was saying we've not had like any easy ones all year,
Nope.
even towards the end, really even towards the end of the year, some of the, like that game against the Colts, they probably could have blown them out a little bit better than they did. Basically the week 17 against the Rams was really the only time where it's like that was a very comfortable, easy, nice win for the LA Chargers. They had been in close games throughout all year. And, just when it seemed like, okay, they've got themselves an easy one here in the biggest of spots, 27-0. Really, I mean, Trevor Lawrence putting together I know we'll talk about his second half performance and everything that was there, but when he put together that end of the first half drive, that was like, without that, they might not win that game. That was a crucial drive from Trevor Lawrence. And even still, it was like, okay, they got their nice little drive at halftime. That's nice, whatever. But I mean, man, just God, what there, and I know we'll talk about the fact that they fired Joe Lombardi and everything that comes out of that. But that's an offense all year, and there's a reason they don't close games out, because they're not built to close games out. They're not a Tennessee Titans team or one of these teams, and even like Dallas Cowboys. Like, you know what? When it's time to grind it out with the run game and run the clock out, they can do that. They don't have that there for with LA for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, I mean, just an unbelievable screw up by the Chargers, and there's really no other way to say it.
Hey, listen, when you have Justin Herbert, you've got Austin Eckler, two guys that are just absolute beasts, the studs. You got Keenan Allen, great player. I know Mike Williams was out of that one, but that's okay. I thought Gerald Everett played a really good ball game as well. The final 7 drives for the Chargers look like this: 4 punts with 2 3-and-outs, 2 field goals, and a missed field goal. You can't have 7 drives and no touchdowns when you have that unit. I'm sorry, you just can't do it. And I know the Jaguars defense, they came to play. Make no mistake, they came to play. But at the end of the day, you cannot look at that roster and tell me 7 drives, Matt Harmon, and you can't get a single touchdown out of 7 drives. That's pathetic.
It kind of comes back to that run game here for me, because you just look at the fact that in the second half, when they're trying to grind the game out, theoretically they're trying to put things away. You look at I'm looking right now, the second half carries for Austin Eckler. First and 10, -4 yards. First and 10, -1 yard. First and 10, right. 0 yards. First and 10, 1 yard. First and 10, 4 yards. Like they're not getting any push, and they're not really able to mount drives when you can't run on first down like that. You're so bad, because it's like, okay, well then you're not going to call a run play on for second and 14, or even like second and 10, second and 11, because then
Yeah.
you're going to put yourself in a disadvantage, like a very obvious passing down situation. So then you pass the ball on second down, and we know that there's problems with the Chargers passing game too. It's not just the run game, but
Right.
yeah, man, just the inability to close that game out was shocking. And it's funny, again, talking to Austin all year, he's been super hard on himself, despite the fact he's scored all these touchdowns, despite the fact nobody scored more touchdowns in the NFL over the last 2 years. And he's like, look, our run game's not good. Like, our run game isn't good. And I'm the running back, whether it, and I know Austin pretty well at this point, like, and this is a guy that's going to usually take on the blame himself, right? He's going to usually take on that his own, but I can speak as someone, that's not involved in the process or whatever, that there are a lot of problems with the run game that aren't just Austin Eckler or whatever, but he has been pretty hard on himself from that standpoint, that the run game hasn't been good, and he is the face of the run game as the running back. And that's just one part of it, that they weren't able to run the ball. There are a lot of problems why they couldn't close that game out. But I was talking about Brandon Staley too. I was going back and forth with people this weekend about, like, or after the game, like, is Brandon Staley a good coach? I don't know where you come down on this, but I think there's two things that are objectively true about Brandon Staley. Actually, two like on-field things that are objectively true about Brandon Staley. Because I do think everybody says he's great with, like, relationships and all of that stuff. The two things that are objectively true about Brandon Staley from an in-game standpoint is he's a great, maybe the best defensive game planner in the NFL. I think the game plan that they pitched Jacksonville in the first half of this game was fantastic.
Right.
A lot of man coverage, forced throws to the outside to Zay and Marvin Jones.
Right.
And those guys are going to be in tight, sticky man coverage, and Trevor Lawrence, you're going to have to pin those throws on these guys if you want to hit those throws. I think they got away from that in the second half, and that's really the second point that I think is objectively true about Brandon Staley is right now he's a terrible in-game manager. He makes terrible in-game decisions, not just the fourth down and the field goal stuff and all that, and like playing starters in week 18, but the inability to just like, okay, this is working for us in the first half. Let's keep pitching it. Like you go to that kind of more of the soft zone coverage, cover two stuff, prevent defense in the second half, and you just get filleted by these guys that we know are great zone beaters like Christian Kirk and everybody else.
I mean, they basically played the second half like the game was already over. They're playing the second half like it was like 6 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. That's how they play. I mean, the offense kind of obviously took a backseat, and the defense took a backseat. I want to get back to that run game that you mentioned as well. You got a guy like Austin Eckler, who clearly is not the biggest back in the world, but obviously an extremely talented running back. He's got a lot of speed, and he's got a lot of, I don't know, man. He just has a lot of shakes, right? Like the guy can get loose, but you got to create space for him, because it's not like this is a guy that's going to be able to kind of, a gap, gap scheme type stuff where it's just like, all right, let's follow full back into the hole and come out the other side, right? Like that's not his game. He can do it. I'm just saying that's not where he's special. He's special on the outsides, right? And for me, the Chargers are about league average when they, in terms of percentage of run plays that go to the outside, okay, outside the tackle box. They ran about 52% of their running plays to the outside, which is about league average. To me, when you have somebody like Austin Eckler, and actually I'm surprised Brandon Staley, coming from that Rams background, and McVay runs so much outside zone. I just don't understand it. It should be, every run should be an outside zone run if it's going to be Austin Eckler. You know what I mean? And maybe you mix it up like, Shanahan has done in San Francisco with an occasional gap scheme here and there. But I think it starts outside zone. But for me, I think when I watch the Chargers play way too often, it starts trying to run that ball between the tackles.
Yep. I think that this is something I've heard the last few years. And I think this is probably not like insider stuff. I think this is generally known as a fact, is that when Brandon Staley got this job with the Chargers, he really wanted to hire somebody from the coaching tree, like this McVay coaching tree, but at that point, coming into the it was coming out of 2020, right? Yeah. That was Justin Herbert's first year. 2021 was his second year. So but everybody wanted to hire. Basically, everybody wants to hire somebody off that tree. So after striking out, he kind of landed on Joe Lombardi, and sometimes this can be really good when you go off the friends and family program. We'll talk about the Giants.
Right.
They're a great
Sure.
example of going away from the friends and family program and how that can be great. But at the same time, you don't really, I don't think that often. I don't think this offense with Joe Lombardi and again, obviously at this point we know he's been fired, so it's old news or whatever. But I don't think that they run that system at all, and I don't think that I don't think Staley ever really wanted to run this type of offense. But he ended up with a guy who'd calling plays in the NFL before, back in Detroit, comes off a successful coaching tree with Sean Payton, stuff like that. But it just has never seemed to really fit the personnel.
So the passing game, I think, for Joe Lombardi, and Charger fans everywhere celebrating the fact that Joe Lombardi is gone. Let me just say two things about this whole Lombardi firing. One, it's that when they fire the OC, I don't know, Matt. To me, that is an indication that Brandon Staley is actually safe.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what, I think the biggest, one of the biggest talking points after that big comeback win for the Jaguars and the loss for the Chargers was that, Brandon Staley's done. Right. Because again, you're talking about some pretty high profile coaches out there that are very interested. Sean Payton comes to mind, of course. Sean Payton, very interested in this Chargers gig, especially with the quarterback that they have there for the Chargers. So I don't know, when they fire Joe Lombardi the way they did, to me, that indicates that Brandon Staley is actually safe. And I think Charger fans are like, oh God, no.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think at this point, I expect Brandon Staley to stay. And usually that's the first thing that you start doing is when you have a disappointing season like this. And look, the Chargers made the playoffs. That's great. It's still a disappointing season for it to end this way. And for most, it was not a smooth ride. And I'm actually glad that I'm glad that they're making some sort of changes, because there is definitely a world where you could sit there and say, look at the injuries we dealt with and all that stuff. Let's just run it all back next year and try to do it one more time and hope we stay healthy. Well, number one, hoping you stay healthy has never worked for the LA Chargers at any point during their existence.
Never.
But secondly, I do think that Staley is looking at this and saying this. Again, this is probably not the offensive coordinator that I dreamed of getting when I got a head coaching job. I probably wanted to pluck somebody from that tree. We'll see who they interview. There are guys like Mike LaFleur is available. He obviously comes off that coaching tree. Him and the Jets have parted ways. He could still
be a great fit.
He could try to pluck somebody from the Rams. I mean, shoot, the Rams get picked dry every year of coaches. I think back to the last time I was talking about this with Andy Behrens this morning, that the last time that Joe Lombardi was offensive coordinator was with Matthew Stafford in Detroit. Matthew Stafford in 2015, Lombardi's final year calling plays there, had a 6.45 air yards per target figure. And that continued into Jim Bob Cooter. Remember our guy, Jim Bob Cooter?
Oh, yeah.
The Cooter took over. And that kind of continued for a while until I think it was 2018. They finally made a change to Darrell Bevell as the offensive coordinator. And then Stafford was leading the league in air yards in 2018, 2019. Actually it was 2020. Either way, regardless, Stafford eventually got back to his gunslinging ways. I think that's where the Chargers are at now with Justin Herbert, that whether it's him or whether it's the system, he's now also compounding the problem where they're getting that ball out in the short areas way too quickly. And that's it's really hard. Football is always hard to parse out, who's at fault or what's the primary thing. And it can be a lot of both things can be true here, because I definitely think that the offense was getting the ball out too fast, was too focused on those checkdowns, those short throws, stuff like that. But man, I mean, the receivers are a problem as well. I love Keenan Allen is an elite route runner. He's a great player, but we know what Keenan Allen's game is. Keenan Allen ran a 4.7 coming into the league. By the way, he's been in the league for a long, long time now. What do you think Keenan Allen runs right now?
Dude, if I had to guess, probably like a 4.75 or something crazy, dude. No, I'm disrespecting. I'm disrespecting.
We ran a 4.7 when he came into the league, and that was a decade ago.
I know. I think he was a little banged up in that process, though. I feel like he was coming off of an ankle surgery or something. I don't know. Anyways, I think no, that's disrespect, dude. I think he could actually run a 4.65.
Either way, that's your top receiver, and we know what his game is. His game is separation, it's route running, and it's in he can rip it deep sometimes, but he's not like a speed type of player. You're not
No,
sitting
he's
there
not.
saying like,
No.
we got to back off coverage on Keenan Allen, that type of stuff. And then
Right.
you talk about Josh Palmer. People know how I feel about Josh Palmer. Josh Palmer's like a whatever number 3 receiver, and he's another guy that's a short possession player. And then you talk about Mike Williams, and I know Mike Williams didn't play in this game, and it was almost kind of driving me nuts that like people are sitting there saying after the game, like, well, Mike Williams would have been nice to have Mike Williams. Like, who do you guys think Mike Williams is? Like, Mike Williams is a good player, but he's not a number 1 receiver. It's not like they didn't have, like Devontae Adams out there. Like Mike Williams, by the way, is a downfield threat because he's a contested catch player, but he's not giving you a lot of big, wide open windows in the intermediate and downfield game. So, and I've been a guy who's defended Mike Williams before, but I think now we've almost like jumped the shark on the Mike Williams stuff a little bit here too. So,
Okay.
the Chargers pass catchers have a lot of names, but I think there's a lack of, again, speed and separation downfield stuff there. But then that brings you to the third thing here. I think Herbert has got to, like, you saw it in that game, man. His eyes are moving. His eyes are like not open, check down, not open, check down. Austin Eckler didn't catch a billion passes this year for no reason, right?
That's true.
Like
right.
he's gotten to that check. He's gotten his brain like ticking through those progressions too fast, not waiting for things to come open. It's not because he doesn't want to get hit. It's because he doesn't want to, he doesn't want to make mistakes. He doesn't want to throw interceptions and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's almost just like a complete, I don't want to say like the Chargers offense is starting from square one or anything like that, but they are certainly restarting here. And I think everybody's got to tweak a little bit here with what's going to happen in LA next year.
I think the team speed we've talked about the team speed being a problem for the Chargers for a very long time, but I also kind of look at the box score too. And to kind of hammer home this Lombardi offense and how everything is so short and underneath, you got to understand 15 out of the 43 pass attempts for Justin Herbert went to tight ends. I'm sorry. And look, Gerald Everett and Parham, look, they had good games. Okay. They did, but I'm just saying, like, I'm sorry, you can't run this offense, arm Justin Herbert. You can't run 15 out of 43 attempts through your tight ends. Come on, man. Like, you got to stress these guys on the outside. You got to stress them downfield a little bit. And you know what? And ultimately, that's going to give Keenan Allen some running room too. When the space clears out, let this guy get on a slant and let him go. This is what we see with other productive wide receivers when they catch these short underneath routes. Sometimes they have a little bit of a runway to pick up yards after catch, and what ends up being a short pass could be a long pass because of the catch and run. And you just don't see the catch and run in this Lombardi offense at all, because way too often guys are coming back to the quarterback.
Yeah.
And man, it is impossible to pick up. Stick, baby. Come back route. Let's go. Those hitches. Oh my God. I just don't want to see that anymore, man. And so I'm happy the Chargers moved on from Joe Lombardi. That being said, I think it was, as you mentioned, a compounding problem. One, I tell you what, when your check down's Austin Eckler, it's not a bad check down. It's a pretty good check down, man. And the lack of team speed. So I'll ask you this, Matt. In the draft, in free agency, where do the Chargers kind of sort of need to fix their offensive woes?
Not in free agency. Have you seen the free agent receivers coming up here? I mean, the top two guys are probably going to be Juju Smith-Schuster and Jacoby Myers. And I love Jacoby Myers, but that's not for the LA Chargers. Not for the LA Chargers. The best like downfield receiver is probably like DJ Chark, and he's more of like in the Mike Williams variety of downfield receivers. I think they will have to look to the draft. Even the guys that I think might be like on the trade market, like DeAndre Hopkins, we know he's going to be on the trade market. That's not really what I'm looking for here. Mike Evans, I think he could end up on the trade market. I love Mike Evans, but I don't think that's what you're looking for here. Then you've got like Mike Evans and poor man's Mike Evans with Mike Williams over there. So a very poor man's Mike Evans, by the way. So I think that they're looking for youth. They're looking for speed in some sort of variety there. And your point about like the route combinations is so well taken. And again, just the way teams are going to defend an offense like this is you're going to squat. You're going to squat, right? Like, I think back to one of the first episodes of this podcast when we talked about the Dallas offense in week 1 against Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Feels like 1,000 years ago now based on what happened last night. But Remember, they were just squatting on all those routes because they didn't respect receivers like Semi Fehoko and Dennis Houston, our guy, right? They're not respecting the speed. And that really was a problem for the entire passing game. That's been a problem for the passing game for the Chargers all year. Think about like the 49ers, man. Somebody catches a ball for the 49ers and there's no one within like 10 yards of them because they're spacing out, they're stretching out, the spacing's good in that offense. Miami, right? Like not again with Skylar Thompson there, but at different points during the year, Jalen Waddle's catching a ball in the middle of the field on a seam route or a deep post, and there's nobody close to him, man.
Right.
The Chargers need both route combinations like that, and they need players like a Jalen Waddle type or a Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk type that's got a little pop to him. They need both of those things to take this offense to the next level.